Eyes in the sky, watching us from space. Hundreds of satellites showing us the world like we've never seen it before. Objects and phenomena which defy explanation.
I can't believe this. This can't be.
A moving island appears in the South Pacific.
This thing is really big. It's the size of a small country.
A city lost beneath the waves.
If this were Atlantis, then it would be the greatest archaeological discovery in history.
And could this be the tomb of Genghis Khan?
We just couldn't believe our eyes. It was just extraordinary.
Baffling phenomena, mysteries from space. What on earth are they? February 2013. An Atlas V rocket carries NASA's state-of-the-art Landsat 8 observation satellite into Earth orbit. 11 months after its deployment, the orbiter captures this weird image high above the waters around an island off the coast of South Korea called Sisan-ri.
This is strange. You don't expect to look at the ocean and see a giant barcode staring back at you.
When I first saw this image, I was really confused. I wondered what on earth could cause this pattern.
The peculiar patterns cover a vast area comparable to the size of San Francisco.
When you realize the scale, it's really hard to think of what it could be. Is it something natural? Is it something man-made?
There are few natural phenomena that are capable of visibly affecting such large areas of sea.
I think the first thing that you have to consider, because it's in the ocean, is could it be marine life? Now, we know that you can see large groups of animals in the ocean from a satellite image.
Every year, billions of sardines spawn off the coast of South Africa, creating giant patterns which are visible from high altitude. The seas around South Korea are home to much larger, stranger life forms.
This area is known to attract the Nomura jellyfish, which is a giant jellyfish, 6 feet long, can weigh hundreds of pounds.
Nomura jellyfish can grow to the size of a small car. They gather in such large numbers that they've been known to capsize 10-ton fishing boats. Could the mystery pattern be a swarm of these giant gelatinous monsters?
We're used to looking for patterns in nature, and usually in the ocean they're swirling, they're more fluid, but this is not like that.
Now, the problem with this theory is marine life doesn't play along with these neat geometric shapes that we're seeing in front of us. It only leaves one possibility. It's man-made.
If these mystery patterns are man-made, then what could they be? Perhaps the volatile history of the region could provide a clue.
There's a lot of animosity between North Korea and South Korea, so they're still in a state of war, and they have border incidents.
Given the location right there next to North and South Korea, you have to wonder, is this some sort of military operation?
4 years before the image was taken, North Korean forces allegedly torpedoed a South Korean warship and shelled an inhabited island. Could the mysterious pattern be part of some kind of South Korean defense system?
I would say that this image is some sort of a shallow water sonar array. Normally they put those in deeper water, but the passive sonar array might be used against diesel submarines in the shallow waters.
Sonar arrays use the fact that sounds can travel vast distances through water to identify possible threats. They can be laid in vast networks stretching for miles below the surface or towed in long lines.
Well, a passive listening array simply listens for all sorts of sounds in the ocean, and it can pick up submarines, ships, even type of torpedo being fired by the sound of it.
Defense analysts believe that South Korea has acquired a new generation of sonar arrays. But the shallow coastal waters in the image would be a highly unusual location to deploy them.
Now, the problem with the listening device theory is you're dealing with shallow waters with lots of noise and fishing boats. The signal-to-noise ratio would be off, and it wouldn't make much sense to put surveillance equipment here.
The mystery pattern is not, it seems, an array of underwater listening posts, but but continuing tensions in the region could still hold the key to identifying the mystery shapes.
Now, a good thing to do is to look to the past and say, what images from history have we seen that look like this? And the first thing that comes up, underwater mines.
During the Korean War, sea mines accounted for every single ship lost by the U.S. Navy. Today, America takes the ongoing danger of mines so seriously that it conducts exercises off the Korean coast specifically to combat the threat.
To be effective, sea mines are often placed in large formations that make it really hard for ships to navigate through them. And that kind of comes to mind when you look at these pictures.
If the shapes in the image are minefields, they're part of a network built on a scale unprecedented in the history of human conflict. But closer analysis does not support the idea.
In my opinion, these are not naval mines. Naval mines would be far too small to see from a satellite image.
Due to the intense military interest in the region, analysts are able to call upon a huge number of historical images of the area. They reveal a clue to the riddle of the mysterious pattern.
The date of this image is key to unlocking this mystery, because when you look at the same image in November as opposed to February or May, you see a dramatic difference in the pattern. That's very common within agricultural environments.
It turns out that the shapes in these images have less to do with Armageddon and more to do with agriculture.
We spoke to people who visited the region. They told us what it was. It's seaweed farms. And you think about it, of course, that makes perfect sense. It's an orderly formation, it's seasonal, it answers all of our questions.
Farmers plant the seaweed in the water just like they would plant crops on land, and they come back later and harvest it to sell to restaurants and stores around the world.
Edible seaweed is a huge industry in Asia. It's a viable, innocent explanation for the mystery pattern. But is everything as it seems?
There are various ways of camouflaging mines, and you can camouflage sea mines to look like seaweed. You can camouflage almost anything.
One thing is certain, this will not be the last mystery in the waters around Korea. Satellites detect an unusual pattern in the remote Mongolian steppes.
I've never seen anything on that scale anywhere in Mongolia that I've been.
Someone went to a lot of effort to make these things. What for?
The strange structure lies in the birthplace of the world's most ruthless warlord, Genghis Khan. In 2014. The WorldView 2 satellite captures high-resolution images of the vast Mongolian plains. For archaeologists like Mark Horton, they're gold dust.
Every time a new set of imagery comes available, we scour it for archaeological information.
His inspection reveals something totally unexpected.
And we just couldn't believe our eyes. It was just extraordinary.
At the end of an area of eastern Mongolia known as the Kurlin Valley lies a strange array of shapes.
I've never seen anything on that scale anywhere in Mongolia that I've been.
A central structure, 50 feet wide, appears surrounded by nearly 100 uniform pockmarks.
I don't know whether they're mounds or depressions, whatever they may be, but it doesn't look natural.
Someone went to a lot of effort to make these things. What for?
The satellite image shows some kind of facility near the structure, which could offer a clue to who might have created it.
Mongolia is riddled with mines.
Further down the valley, there is one of the largest coal mines in the world.
Could the unusual marks be the spoil heaps of a mining complex?
Upwards of $50 billion worth of resources are believed to exist within Mongolia. We should call it Minegolia.
But the Kurlin Valley structures don't match the size and shape of modern mining works.
They're not big enough, they're not in the right orientation. It just doesn't make sense.
Clearly, it's not a modern mine.
The location of the site in deepest Mongolia provides the biggest clue to the people who might have constructed it.
The Khelin Valley is what they refer to as the hearth of the Mongols. So this is very much their homeland.
The Mongol Empire exploded into history 800 years ago, led by merciless warlord Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan was the greatest Mongolian who ever lived. It's as simple as that. He was a superb warrior, a great tactician, and he put together the largest land empire the world has ever known.
The Khan conquered over 12 million square miles of land, sweeping across the Russian steppes at the head of an unstoppable army of horsemen.
The key asset that the Mongols had was the horse. The horse was the most extraordinary war machine.
These warrior horsemen built only one true city, Karakoram, the ritual capital of the Mongol Empire.
In general, the Mongols didn't really build cities. They were a nomadic people that relied upon horses and stock. They lived in tents.
So that's why it's probably difficult to find Mongol settlements, because nomadic populations tend to leave few remains behind.
If the weird pattern is not a Mongol settlement, then what is it? Archaeologist Erdine Mayagmar investigates the site on the ground. She discovers that the central feature in the satellite image is a vast collection of rocks.
This is amazing. This is much bigger than we thought.
Ground-level inspection reveals the gory purpose of the surrounding formation of shapes.
We have bits of horse buried in these pits, which almost certainly been for sacrificial purposes.
If horse bones really have been placed in the pits around the mound, they could only serve one purpose. Archaeologist Mark Horton has seen this pattern many times before.
So we know that this huge central mound is a burial site.
The satellite has photographed an ancient tomb, and the scale of the sacred site suggests that a very powerful person is buried there.
The bigger mound, the more important the person.
Whoever was buried there would have been subject to the most enormous ritual, the most enormous expense.
The location of such an enormous mound in the center of the Mongolian heartland raises the staggering possibility that satellite images might have revealed the hidden tomb of Genghis Khan.
Finding the tomb of Genghis Khan would be the greatest archaeological discoveries of our generation.
The potential for riches in Genghis Khan's tomb are extraordinary. You think of it, it's the world's largest land empire. The riches that must have been plundered and the riches that might be inside this tomb boggle the mind.
But the very size of the mound contradicts Khan's dying wish.
We know that Genghis Khan, when he died, he did not want his grave to be known. So most likely, his grave would have been a simple grave.
Khan went to great lengths to ensure his burial site would not be found.
The people who built his tomb, so the story goes, were all murdered. And then, just to make sure, the soldiers who murdered them were also murdered, because they didn't want any word to escape of the location of Genghis Khan's tomb.
So it's very, very unlikely that you're going to find it. It's an area that's half the size of Western Europe. You're literally looking for a pin.
The idea that this could be the tomb of Khan takes another blow when excavations in the region unearth bronze artifacts. They suggest that the site was originally built 2,000 years before Khan's time.
We think that this particular monument belongs to the late Bronze Age, which is maybe about 1,000 to 1,500 BC.
But Genghis Khan was a master of deception. Could this burial mound be part of an elaborate ploy to fool his enemies?
It doesn't mean Genghis Khan is not buried there. He could have repurposed, essentially, these mounds as a burial site. It may have been a way to trick people.
Until the tomb is excavated, no one can be sure who is buried there. A satellite captures an image of a massive object in the middle of an open ocean.
Whatever it is they found, it wasn't there before. It just appeared out of nowhere.
The thing is more than 200 miles long, and it's moving.
This thing is really big. It's the size of a small country.
We really need to know what is going on here.
August 1st, 2012. As a passenger jet travels above the Pacific Ocean, almost 500 miles from the New Zealand coast, the pilot spots something in the water below him.
The pilot looks out the window and sees what looks like a giant island in the South Pacific.
The Pacific holds around 25,000 islands. The plane is nowhere near any of them.
This is supposed to be open ocean. There shouldn't be anything visible other than water for hundreds of miles.
Investigators immediately consult scans of the area taken by NASA's Terra satellite. Recent images confirm their suspicion. Something has materialized in the middle of nowhere.
Whatever it is they found was not there before. It just appeared out of nowhere.
Where would it have come from? What actually are we looking at?
Whatever the thing is, however it appeared, it's more than 200 miles long.
The scale of this is enormous. This is the size of a small country.
When analysts compare the coordinates of the pilot's sighting with the latest satellite image, they discover something disturbing.
This object appears to be moving, and islands don't move.
Investigators' calculations show the thing now spans an area bigger than Israel. And the massive anomaly seems to be heading towards Australasia.
Worst case scenario is that this giant floating mass actually makes landfall, and who knows what damage it could cause if that happens.
We need to know where it came from and how it got there.
All the world's great oceans merge with the seas around Antarctica. Each year, this frozen continent sheds more than 150 billion tons of ice, much of it floating north towards the Pacific Ocean.
We have learned that ice does indeed break off in huge chunks off of Antarctica. Back in March in 2002, for example, a chunk of ice the size of Rhode Island broke off and actually floated out into the ocean.
Giant collapsed ice shelves have been spotted off the coast of New Zealand before, but never one this big or this far north.
The water in that part of the South Pacific, even though it might feel cold to you and I, ice is not going to survive very long there.
Sea temperature data of the area confirms that the Pacific Enigma cannot be some kind of supersized iceberg.
There's just no way that an ice island is going to make it that far north.
Further NASA images of the Enigma reveal that not only is it moving, it also appears to be changing shape. This discovery prompts another theory about its true nature.
One thing that it might be is an island of garbage. In the Pacific, there's something known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and it's a collection of our waste.
The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is actually two gigantic areas of debris that cover thousands of square miles of ocean. These Godzilla-sized drifting refuse dumps are fed by a giant rotating current called the North Pacific Gyre.
Because of the way the gyre works, it's spinning and basically pulling all of the trash into the middle. So whenever you get trash into one of these gyres, nothing will get out.
Could the anomaly be a massive morphing trash vortex? Like the Pacific Garbage Patch, it constantly changes shape and location. But scientists are not convinced.
I've actually been to investigate the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Most of it are little pieces of plastic, little pieces of trash floating under the ocean. So it doesn't really match what we're seeing in this image, so it's probably not that.
The pieces of the garbage in the patch, they're way too small. They wouldn't show up on a satellite image.
The anomaly moves relentlessly towards land. The pressure to work out what it is and where it came from builds.
Like all geologic investigations, it really comes down to getting a sample to analyze. Someone really needs to get a piece of this material.
On August 9th, a full week after the initial sighting, the New Zealand Navy dispatches a ship to study the strange phenomenon.
The ship goes to investigate, and what they find is something that's 300 miles long and 30 miles wide, and the captain reports that it's the strangest thing he's ever seen.
It's a unique and bizarre thing to witness, and it looks like mud or some kind of dirt, this skin, this mass of rock just floating on the surface of the water.
The concept of a giant mass of rocks moving across the ocean seems to defy the laws of physics. But the Navy's examination of the sample proves that's exactly what it is. The weird stones are pumice, a type of lightweight rock formed when undersea volcanoes eject lava into the water.
When pumice is formed, the volcanic eruption injects a lot of gas bubbles into the lava, and they get trapped inside the rock, becomes buoyant, and floats to the surface.
The giant anomaly is in fact billions and billions of individual pumice stones floating across the ocean like a country-sized raft.
If there's enough pumice all gathered in one spot, it can look like a solid island, but it's not.
The final challenge for investigators is identifying the source of the pumice island. Turning again to satellite data, they come across this image, taken above an undersea volcano known as the Havre Seamount. It clearly shows a plume of smoke moving to the northwest, and below it, the birth of the Pacific Enigma. The biggest raft in the world.
It's amazing that a volcano more than 2,000 feet under the ocean could pump out enough rock to cover a major American city. And without satellite imagery, we never would have seen it.
A scientist analyzing satellite images of ancient marshlands spots signs of enormous structures buried beneath the mud.
They appear to be man-made, but what are they and who made them?
Are they evidence of a lost biblical city or of something even bigger?
Is this truly the site of Atlantis?
If this were Atlantis, then it would be the greatest archaeological discovery in history.
2003. A German researcher is using satellite images to search for evidence of lost civilizations around the Mediterranean. As he scans a wildlife preserve on the southern Spanish coast, he spots what he believes are giant rings hidden beneath the sandy marshes.
You have to focus, but when you do, you see what appears to be concentric circles.
The image comes to the attention of physicist and amateur historian Rainer Kuhne. As he studies it in more detail, he notices what appear to be large rectangular structures near the center of the circles.
I saw two rectangles. One was 250 meters in length. The other one was much larger.
To find out what is in the image, a team of scientists heads to the site to investigate. Geoscientist Dr. Philip Reeder is one of them.
Part of the analysis of that image is what's called ground truthing. So you actually go to that place and you see what's there.
The Wildlife Preserve is a national park where excavation is prohibited. To solve the problem, Reeder turns to a state-of-the-art technique called electroresistivity tomography, or ERT.
ERT shoots pulses of electricity into the ground beneath the Earth's surface, and then the materials then reflect that pulse of electricity back up to paint a picture of what's beneath the surface.
The ERT creates a kind of ghost image of the site. The hard data seems to confirm Kuhne's hunch. A series of massive circular structures appear to be buried just inland from the Spanish coast.
The fact that the analysis of the image indicated that there was something beneath the surface is truly exciting, and it makes you want to determine exactly what is down there.
If circular structures are concealed under this marshy coastline, then who built them? For some investigators, the first clue comes from the writings of the Greek philosopher Plato.
When we see the concentric circles, we're reminded of Plato's account of the lost city of Atlantis, for he describes it as having circular harbors.
Based on Plato's interpretation, could this be the location of where Atlantis existed?
The problem with the Atlantis theory is that very few experts believe the legendary city existed at all.
I think it was not a real place, because Plato described Atlantis as larger than Africa and Asia together.
countless researchers have attempted to locate Atlantis. Many now believe that Plato may have simply made it up.
The thing about Plato is you have to realize he got all his information secondhand. Do we really take him seriously?
I don't know if Atlantis is real or just a figment of Plato's imagination, but I feel that there is something there.
Investigators must dig deeper into the past for clues to who built the structures. One comes from the Bible. In its pages, they discover references to a lost city, famed for its riches, called Tarshish.
According to the Bible, Tarshish is a legendary trading center that provides gold and silver, exotic spices, all across the Mediterranean.
Many of the Bible's clues to the location of the city of Tarshish are vague. But intriguingly, at least one ties it to the site in the satellite image.
According to the scriptures, Tarshish lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which was a old reference and common reference to the Rock of Gibraltar.
The Straits of Gibraltar connect Spain with North Africa, and it's just beyond Gibraltar that we find our image.
The location of the image and the fabled city matches up. Are the circular structures in the image just a small section of a vanished biblical city? Dr. Reeder and his team searched the site for physical evidence to back up this theory. The initial results are disappointing.
The pottery that was found in the area, once it was dated, indicated that it was from a much newer time than you would expect for Tarshish, as it's mentioned in the Bible.
The discovery of the newer pottery fragments suggests the site isn't as old as investigators thought. But the Bible offers a possible explanation for this discrepancy in the book of Isaiah.
Overflow thy land as a river, O daughter of Tarshish. There will be a girdle no more. And what that clearly means is that a flood is coming and that there will be nothing to contain the flood and that the city will be destroyed by a flood.
Did a giant biblical flood cover the site, depositing a layer of newer material on top of the treasures of Tarshish? Evidence from the site seems to lend weight to the theory.
Drilling holes into the Danyana plain indicated that there was a layer of sand beneath the landscape there, and this layer of sand could indicate that there was a tsunami.
What would that do to any archaeological evidence? It would wipe it out.
Could an underwater volcano have created a massive tsunami that destroyed the legendary city of Tarshish and buried its riches? And could Tarshish and Atlantis be one and the same?
What's frustrating for me is that there's three things that tie this site to Atlantis. It's just beyond the Pillars of Hercules. There's circular harbors, and it was destroyed by a cataclysm, but yet we can't excavate. I can't think of another site that more perfectly fits the description of Atlantis. The problem is, we'll never know.
A huge slash scars the ground of the world's biggest sand desert.
It looks like something has crashed into the ground at high velocity.
Just what is hiding under the sands of the Sahara?
We have something in the middle of nowhere and we don't know what it is.
Nobody knows what's going on in this area of the Sahara.
January 20th, 2005. A QuickBird observation satellite monitoring the remote Saharan region of Ouargla in Algeria captures an intriguing image.
When you look at satellite images of the Sahara, it's vast, vast, vast expanses of almost nothingness. Here you see something different, something unusual peeking out of the sand. It doesn't make much sense.
Investigating the mystery shape on the ground is not an option. Algeria's long civil war officially ended in 2002. But ongoing skirmishes make large areas of the country's desert interior a no-go zone.
As a country, Algeria has been in a state of lockdown for many years. We don't really know a lot about what's going on in there.
Because of that, we rely on satellite imagery to see and notice any changes that happen there.
The first clue to the mystery shape's origin comes from the shapes of the shadows around it. But close analysis of the image suggests this is no freak of nature.
What is this thing? The geometry of it certainly does not look like anything that naturally occurs.
It's certainly man-made. I mean, you don't see anything like that in nature. I don't know what it is.
When investigators study the mysterious shape, they notice lines stretching out to either side of it. This prompts some to suggest that it could be the wing and fuselage of a plane buried in the dunes.
The shape of what's going on sort of looks like what you would imagine if a plane were to hit the sand and then slide down a sand dune. Looks like something has crashed into the ground at high velocity.
Historical records of aviation accidents in the region offer some support for the crash theory.
In 2014, there were 2 plane crashes in this desert, giving some plausibility to the idea that yes, planes do crash here, and maybe this was one of those.
But there are crucial differences between this image and those of known desert crash sites.
Once an object like a plane hits the ground, it shatters in the forward direction and opens up like a fan and goes splattering out into all directions forward. We don't see that here at all.
Investigators enhance the image to search for more clues to the shape's origin. They discover that the wing-shaped outline is just one side of a rectangle that surrounds the giant tube.
You can see a faint image of a rectangle around this main shape here, suggesting that humans built it. But what's it for? It's in the middle of the desert.
The people who live in this region of the Sahara are nomadic tribes like the Tuareg and Bedouin. They live in tents or semi-permanent circular dwellings that look nothing like the mystery shape. But in recent times, other peoples have occupied this remote area of the desert.
The French tested their nuclear weapons in this part of the desert in the 60s and 70s. Could their nuclear testing be connected to the images that we see today?
In 1960, France became the 4th global nuclear power when it detonated a 70-kiloton bomb in the Algerian Sahara. It was the first of a long series of massive explosions that rocked the desert over the next 6 years.
They believe they had 13 or 14 tests that were underground, one of which was a big problem because it leaked radiation, and it was responsible for radiating a whole area and hurting a bunch of people.
Before conducting their tests, the French built 2 known test bases in the Sahara. But none of the acknowledged test sites are close to the site photographed by Quickbird.
The nearest French nuclear tests were miles and miles and miles away. And despite the shape of this formation, there's no evidence there's actually any buildings there.
Probably not a base of any sort. And besides that, above-ground nuclear testing would have obliterated any signs of anything in this area.
The nature of the 2005 image remains a mystery for several years. But in 2011, new images of the region shed light on the mystery.
Fast forward a few years and we find another satellite image that looks quite different from the original. You can see that there's some type of buried pipeline or demarcation zone.
The new images show what appears to be a rectangular compound rising out of the sands.
The evidence in this image suggests that there's an oil or gas exploration site that is now fully completed in that exact same spot.
The new data makes it clear that the 2005 shape was the foundation for a new drilling site to extract oil from deep below the Sahara.
It's now an oil rig, and that makes it kind of obvious what we were seeing before. We were seeing a piece of a pipeline jutting out the sand, surrounded by what is probably a protective fence separating the area.
Today, this rig is just one of dozens that have appeared in this hostile corner of the Sahara Desert.
When you think of the Sahara Desert, the first thing that comes to mind is an endless expanse of sand and really nothing else. But in reality, there are a lot of resources in there that are buried under that sand that have a lot of value.
The original image was a kind of snapshot in time. The instant when one of the most desolate regions on Earth was about to be conquered by man. As a brutal civil war tears Syria apart, United Nations satellites keep watch for signs of crimes against humanity.
ISIS is taking control of the region with just enormous suffering by the local population.
In the heart of the conflict zone, ISIS destroys an ancient site, a temple they believe is dedicated to the devil.
What is an ancient temple dedicated to Satan doing in the middle of the Syrian desert?
May 2015. Across central Syria, government forces are in retreat. The coalition of terror known as Islamic State seizes the ancient city of Palmyra.
Palmyra has always been strategically important. It has attracted the Roman army, it attracted Mark Antony, it attracted the Assad regime that encamped there for a long time, and now it's attracted ISIS.
The UN puts the World Heritage Site under satellite surveillance.
When we first heard that ISIS had taken Palmyra, we were very concerned that we were going to see the complete destruction of the site because we had seen that in other areas that ISIS controlled.
The focus of ISIS attention is the 2,000-year-old Temple of Baal.
This is a magnificent temple set in a huge sanctuary. It's about twice the size of Vatican Square.
The very existence of the structure is an affront to their beliefs.
With respect to ISIS, the Temple of Baal presents a real problem, a double whammy, if you will. Firstly, it's a false god, according to Islam, so that's not good. But even more importantly, it represents Beelzebub, who is the devil, who is completely the enemy of their one true God.
Centuries ago, both Muslims and Christians believed Baal was a fallen angel, expelled from heaven along with an army of demons. Satan personified. For ISIS, a temple to Baal is like a monument to the Antichrist. In September 2015, satellite imagery confirms the UN's worst fears. ISIS has wiped the Temple of Baal off the face of the earth. For them, it was a temple to Satan. But to the ancient peoples who lived in this city, Baal was no devil. He was their god of gods, possessing many faces, one of which had power over storms and agriculture. His massive temple complex in the heart of Palmyra was a symbol of the wealth and power of this desert city, perched on the border between the Roman and Persian empires.
Palmyra was a trading hub at the crossroads of ancient civilizations, and it just kept growing.
Now, Islamic State's act of destruction has focused world attention on the city, and the wealth of satellite images offers archaeologists investigating its history a new perspective.
Satellite imagery gives us a bird's eye view of human settlements and their broader environmental realities.
You can see things you can only spot from space.
In the case of Palmyra, it enabled us to understand better its relationship to the landscape in ways that would have been impossible from the ground.
Archaeologists have an opportunity to answer a fundamental question about ancient Palmyra.
How did a city as large as Palmyra survive in the desert 2,000 years ago?
The desert city must have faced problems with water and food.
If you have a population to feed, you're going to need to create that food, and to support your agricultural needs, you're going to have an irrigation system that will supply water to create the crops.
Palmyra was fed by a water source called the Ekfa Spring that was active until the 1990s. But the spring could never have sustained a population of 100,000 people.
We know Palmyra was a relatively large town in the middle of the desert. It's hard to imagine a spring like that could actually sustain such a large population.
If the Ekfa Spring could not supply water to such a large city, where else was it getting its water?
Satellite imagery can provide a clue to how the city got the water it needed to grow into the vast metropolis that built the Temple of Baal.
Satellite images often enable us to see the larger landscape. So in the areas of Palmyra, we don't just see pure desert, we also see arid steppes.
arid steppe is a kind of rocky grassland, a halfway house between desert and prairie.
These arid steppes do have rainfall sometimes of the year. They often have little river valleys, these wadis that we call.
Wadis are channels resembling riverbeds carved into the ground by rain. In these deserts, rain is rare, but when it comes, it's sudden and it's heavy.
The word wadi simply means a valley or a stream. These are quite dramatic in areas with very high but very short-term concentrations of rainfall. So rain over a week or so might strip down steep-sided valleys and then just flow off into aquifers deep below the landscape.
Images from the Landsat satellite show a huge network of wadis to the north and west of the city. But for Palmyra to expand to a size that could have supported the Temple of Baal, it would have needed a system to bring water in from afar. Further satellite images reveal a complex system of water channels and underground canals called qanats, directed toward the city from almost 20 miles across the desert.
What we're seeing are access holes of features that are called qanats. Qanats are underground irrigation features that transport water from higher elevation to lower elevation. Qanats are quite extensive in the Near East. They are found in places like Turkey, in Iran, mountainous regions with valleys that need irrigation.
In the years prior to the temple's destruction, archaeologists digging in Palmyra discovered the remains of the water distribution system.
There is, or at least there was, a magnificent marble water tank that was connected to a complex series of underground canals. There was also evidence of a sophisticated series of water pipes.
This ingenious engineering was what ultimately enabled the people of Palmyra to build one of the wonders of the world.
The secret of Palmyra's success in terms of water management was long-term engineering, development over centuries, and for that you need the political will, the military peace, and the economic background that could really exploit this.
If anyone in ancient Palmyra ever asked the question, what did the Romans do for us? The answer was in the water they drank and the food they ate.
The city reached its peak in the 3rd century AD, when it even challenged the might of the Roman Empire before the Romans brought it down. After that, the Golden City slowly crumbled into decline. Today, the Temple of Baal is gone forever. An army of killers stands guard over the site of its destruction, but the evidence of their crimes can still be seen from space.